Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Force of Flow. Today, we are going to be talking about baby boomers, Generation X, Y, and Z. So, before we get into it, let me go ahead and define these for those of you that aren't aware of what this actually means. So, baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964, and they got their name from the rise in birth rates that occurred during World War II. So, anyone born between 1940s and after World War II. Generation Y, or millennials as they are called, are the younger generation born between the 1980s and 2000. They are the largest generation to blame from the transition for industrial to service based economy and are more varied than prior generations in terms of their race, ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation. Then we come to Generation Z, which is the youngest generation that is present in the workforce today. And those are people that are born between 1997 and 2012. Now, before I forget them, Generation X. So that's my generation. We are kind of considered the middle children. We are a smaller generation, typically described as resourceful, independent, and good at maintaining a work life balance. And we were, fun fact, the first generation to grow up with a personal computer. So that's the definition of the generation. So if I go ahead and use these terms, then you know which groups of people I'm referring to throughout this podcast. So, the fascinating thing I was confronted with and I became aware of was this generation gap. And in my employer, JP Morgan Chase, that became an awareness of mine in 2017 when I worked there in Columbus, Ohio. I was a scrum master of two teams that were mainly millennials, and I just noticed that there was something off, and I didn't quite click with these people as hard as I tried. And so I took a step back and I wanted to analyze what the composition of my team was and why. And I realized that the mentality differed there quite a bit. Loyalty, respect for my elders, I was disciplined, I tried to be diplomatic and find compromises. And perhaps the most important was, you know what, we need to put this aside at the end of the day, our differences, just to get it done. On their side, I noticed it was more of a unapologetic, extrinsically motivated environment for them. And what I mean with extrinsically motivated, maybe money was the main factor there. Or, what would my bonus look like? Having to do as little as possible and get the most reward out of it. They tended to look after themselves and they were very much focused on social media and the effects that this had on them. Very tech focused. So when I became a coach a couple years later, my responsibility focused more on mentoring the teams, training them, and partnering with about 15 scrum masters to look after their teams. Now, these 15 scrum masters, they were mainly baby boomers, and we often had conversations about the composition of their teams. And there, too, they felt a disconnect with the members. And they felt that there was a loss of respect and no loyalty. And they had often heard that the younger people on their team identified that their ways were so outdated and old fashioned. The youngsters had very little loyalty and very little drive, and it was come in to the office as late as possible and leave as early as possible. That was their interpretation of, well, we'll come just to get the basics, the pure minimum done. So there was little sense of accountability. And this is, I think, the term that I can highlight here: accountability within a team. It wasn't just the individuals coming together to have to make something happen. The Scrum Masters wanted more than that. They wanted there to be a sense of, hey, this is my responsibility. We as a unit will work on something to get value delivered in the hands of our customer. Otherwise, it would be individuals in silos just by term alone forming a group. And what's the sense of that when we're also talking about agility? So, Generation X, my generation, was stuck and is stuck. And we often feel this way, confronted with baby boomers. So, we understand their attitude towards employers, but we are also leaning towards the younger generations, getting a feel for the environment that they're coming from. So, in essence, what we try to do is we try to bridge the gap and try to bring these people to the table. So, millennials and Gen Z, they want to live their life and find more of a balance between their free time and time spent earning money. They have seen the toll that being loyal has taken on these baby boomers, and they don't want to be a slave towards work, which is also understandable. If you look at our environment today, political turmoil, we have wars going on, we have uncertainty in the marketplace. They want to work to live and not live to work. They also have seen leadership roles as being more unattractive. This is very interesting. As a Generation Xer, I have learned and grown up in a household where my parents constantly have asked me, what are the next steps? How are you going to develop yourself more? Are you going to stay where you are? And I think a lot of younger generations see this as, why should we take on more responsibility? Why? Because it's harder. The environment in the workplace is much more complex, and there are many more elements that they have to consider and juggle. And this is frustrating. And the job, if it's more frustrating, they haven't learned this element of being patient and building up a tolerance for frustration. Growing up in the digital age, where things change all the time with a swipe of the screen, the people don't want to commit. They want to enjoy the now, not knowing what the future holds. So, having as much as possible upfront without having to sacrifice everything. This enables them also to preserve their values. And that's another topic to interpret. Values that we have today. I mean, mine have changed because I'm in an adaptive process. From year to year, things in the marketplace and work, my profession, my home life, politically, socially, all these things matter. So you have a core foundation of values, but it tends to start shifting. And this is also something that is taking place with these younger generations as well. Seems like logical behavior, given that they've witnessed generations before them work themselves to breaking points before they even get to enjoy and live their life. So, as a leader, I've enjoyed building high performing teams. And these high performing teams are not just comprised of different genders, but also different generations, different experiences, knowledge, and skills. And it's been a privilege, I must say, and a challenge, of course, to bring these people together. So, a tip that I have for any leader out there, any scrum master, any release train engineer, any coach, Try to find common ground to build an understanding. Try to figure out where these sides are coming from and why people react the way that they do. You don't have to have them agree, but guiding them to a place where respect can be built. So, high performing teams have something in common. This word is incredibly important. It's psychological safety. Now, according to Amy Edmondson, she's a Harvard Business Review professor. She wrote The Fearless Organization. It means that the members take risks and they dare to speak up. They disagree openly and voice their concerns because they know that there will not be negative repercussions. Their group learning is shaped and it's affecting their team performance in a positive way. And the benefits that come out of high performing teams with psychological safety is innovation, creativity. They're motivated and resilient. These teams are teams for the future. Together they adapt, together they change, together they respect their differences. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode exploring the differences in generations. And I'm sure we will get back to this as this is an ever changing, ever evolving topic of discussion. Thank you for spending the time with me. I wish you well, and may the force of flow be with you. Bye bye.